Richard the Lionheart, The Crusader King Episode 1, The Lion Cub Roars, a prince forged in rebellion after the epic saga of Saladin. We turn our gaze westward, to a realm across the seas, ruled by a dynasty whose ambition knew no bounds, the Plantagenets. At its head, the formidable King Henry II, and his equally powerful queen, Eleanor of Aquitaine. From a young age, he was destined for the Duchy of Aquitaine, a wild and independent land that would shape his very soul. Aquitaine, with its proud, often rebellious nobility, was no easy dominion. It was here, in constant skirmishes and sieges, that Richard first honed his military skills, earning the respect, and sometimes the fear, of his subjects. Unlike his elder brothers, he seemed to inherit his mother's fiery spirit and love for the martial arts. He earned a reputation for ruthlessness, executing prisoners and pillaging on towns. Henry, consumed by jealousy, saw Richard as a threat to his inheritance. The rivalry, nurtured by their mother, Eleanor, escalated into a series of violent clashes, destabilizing the fragile peace in the Angevin Empire. The seeds of a darker legacy were sown during these turbulent years, leaving a stain on his otherwise heroic image. Once again, Richard found himself on the front lines, defending his hard-won gains and proving his military mettle. His tactical brilliance and personal bravery were on full display. He led daring night attacks, executed brilliant sieges, and inspired his men with his sheer determination. However, victory was a double-edged sword. On one hand, there was the pressing need to secure his kingdom, to end the bloody civil war that threatened to consume all. Below him, his knights drilled tirelessly, preparing for the coming campaign. Ever since the news of Jerusalem's capture by Saladin had reached the shores of England, the country had been buzzing with anticipation. They represented not just the nobility of England, but the fervent piety that coursed through the veins of the common folk as well. Each man carried with him the hopes and fears of a nation, each sword stroke a testament to their unwavering faith. Now, as the final preparations were underway, a sense of purpose pervaded the kingdom. He, too, grappled with doubts, torn between the call of duty and the demands of his kingdom. But as the debate raged on, a quiet confidence grew within him. Battles were fought, sieges were laid, and one by one, the pockets of resistance fell silent. Nobles from across Europe answered his call, drawn by the promise of adventure and the lure of religious merit. But Richard, with his keen eye for strategy, saw an opportunity to forge alliances that could reshape the political landscape of Europe. By the time Richard was ready to depart for France, his authority was firmly established, his kingdom secured. Richard realized that his place was in the saddle, leading his knights into battle, not sitting on a throne while his kingdom crumbled. But as they stood on the precipice of adventure, little did they know the trials that awaited them. For the road to Jerusalem was fraught with peril, and the clash with Saladin's forces was looming on the horizon. The year was 1189, and the call of the crusade was echoing in every knight's heart. Which historical figure do you want to see us cover next? Let us know in the comments. The fate of Jerusalem, perhaps the very future of Christianity, rested on his shoulders. Stay tuned for the next episode to find out how Richard's legend grew on the battlefields of the Holy Land. Don't forget to subscribe to be part of the epic journey. Yet as he looked out at his assembled army, a sense of purpose filled him. He would go on crusade, but he would do so on his own terms. First, he would crush any lingering rebellion in England, securing his realm before setting his sights on the Holy Land. But for Richard, it was a call to arms that resonated onto fronts. And on the other, there was the sacred duty to the Holy Land, the yearning to liberate Jerusalem from Muslim rule. Before him sat his counselors, a motley crew of loyalists and skeptics, each weighing the risks and rewards of the crusade. At the heart of this alliance was young King Philip Augustus of France. Once a reluctant ally, Philip had blossomed into a shrewd political player, recognizing the benefits of a united front against their common enemies. Some argued for staying in England, fortifying their position and waiting for a more opportune moment. Richard, the warrior king, brought unmatched martial prowess to the alliance, while Philip, the statesman, provided the much-needed political finesse. Others, their voices drowned out by the prospect of glory, urged Richard to seize the chance to liberate the Holy Land. Richard's victories only amplified Henry's determination, turning the war into a protracted and bloody affair. Yet this conflict was different. The stakes were higher. The civil war with his brother Henry had left deep scars on the kingdom. Richard, despite his military successes, knew that his authority was tenuous at best. The threat of renewed hostilities by the ever-jealous Henry loomed like a dark cloud on the horizon. The war was not just about asserting dominance or protecting vassals. It was a struggle for the soul of the kingdom. Their domain, the Angevin Empire, stretched from Scotland to the Pyrenees, a testament to their power. The call for a crusade was sounded, and soon, nobles and commoners alike were donning the Crusader's cross, preparing to answer the call of duty and faith. But within this vast realm, a storm was brewing, not from external foes, but from within their own blood. Richard, just 16, joined his brothers, Henry the Young King and Geoffrey, in this massive revolt. In 1189, a messenger arrived bearing grave news from the Holy Land. Jerusalem had fallen into Muslim hands. A stunned silence fell over the court. The loss of Jerusalem was not just a setback, it was a profound shock, a wound to the heart of Christendom. It was a brutal, sprawling conflict, testing Richard's nascent abilities as a commander. The kingdom was exhausted, the treasury was drained, and the people were demoralized. As the war dragged on, the once proud Angevin Empire teetered on the brink of collapse. Though ultimately suppressed by his father, it was a harsh lesson in warfare and betrayal. Born in 1157, Richard was the third legitimate son of Henry and Eleanor. He spent years crushing the rebellious barons, often with extreme brutality. He was a master of siege warfare and a fierce battlefield commander, earning his early reputation as a formidable warrior. These campaigns, though against his own vassals, were a crucible that forged his legendary military skills. Eleanor, herself a queen of immense character, instilled in Richard a deep understanding of chivalry, poetry, and leadership. The Plantagenet family was a viper's nest. Henry II's sons, impatient for power, rebelled against their father, egged on by their mother, Eleanor. After the rebellion, Richard returned to Aquitaine, but the fighting was far from over. Richard's prowess in battle was undeniable, yet his victories came at a cost. As Richard's fame grew, so did the friction with his brothers, especially Henry the Young King, heir to England. In 1187, Henry the Young King, backed by their mother and a coalition of nobles, rebelled openly. The war was on. Richard fought with the ferocity of a cornered lion. Caught in the throes of civil war, the Plantagenet Dynasty was tearing itself apart. But amidst this turmoil, a glimmer of hope emerged. The news reverberated across Europe, stirring a religious fervor that transcended borders and rivalries. Meanwhile, back in England, the war with his brother raged on. Richard found himself torn between two worlds. Richard the Lionheart, the Crusader King Episode 2. The Crusade's calling, assembling the might. Richard stood on the ramparts of his castle, surveying the landscape. For weeks, England had been a maelstrom of activity. Richard's knights were a mix of seasoned veterans and eager young squires. Yet even as the knights prepared to set sail, the shadow of internal conflict loomed large. Richard stood before his assembled court, his voice echoing through the great hall. Richard the Lionheart, though a warrior of unparalleled skill, was not invincible. And so, with a mix of resolve and trepidation, Richard made his decision. With the council over, Richard turned his attention to the task at hand, suppressing the last embers of rebellion within his kingdom. Now, assembling his crusade force was no simple feat. He negotiated with kings and princes, forming a coalition of unprecedented strength. Together, Richard and Philip formed a formidable duo, balancing each other's strengths and weaknesses. As the Crusaders prepared to embark on their holy mission, Richard couldn't help but feel a surge of excitement mixed with apprehension. Richard the Lionheart, with his unmatched martial skills and unbending resolve, was ready to lead his knights into the unknown. And so, with a mixture of piety, ambition, and the thirst for glory, Richard the Lionheart, King of England and Duke of Normandy, set sail for France, embarking on a journey that would etch his name in the annals of history. But what challenges awaited Richard in the Holy Land? How would he fare against Saladin's formidable forces? And would he succeed in recapturing Jerusalem? Thank you for watching.